When it comes to any form of sport, everyone watching tends to love an underdog story. Whether it's a lower league football club making a cup run, or a nobody in a sport like tennis making their mark in an individual context, you tend to see people who didn't know this person or team existed mere days or weeks ago cheering them on quietly and hoping the best for them. Formula 1 is no different, as it's had its fair share of backmarker teams, from the classic 1970s outfits like Token, Mackie or Techno, to the ones run by clueless or crazy team bosses that came in during the late 80s and early 90s, like Life Racing Engines or Andrea Moda. The three new entrants that made their debuts in 2010 all at least had some fans, but while these small and unsuccessful constructors garner less sizable fan bases, they very rarely last long. None of the ones that I mentioned that competed during the 20th century lasted longer than 3 years, neither completed a full season's worth of races, which is a damning indictment into just how difficult it is to survive on a shoestring budget, often with infinitesimally smaller amounts of staff compared to the big teams. I could drop more names, whether it be the mid-90s trio of Simtech, Pacific and 40, to MasterCard Lola, Venturi or Fond Metal. Essentially what I'm saying is, 95% of these cash-strapped and uncompetitive operations make a quiet entrance, run around at the back and do nothing on the performance front before dying out within about 4 years, with some lasting even less. The reason why I said 95% of the time and not all of the time though, is because there is one major exception to that trend. A team that joined before established names like Benetton or Jordan and outlasted far more successful outfits such as Brabham, Lotus and Tyrrell. They survived as a mostly backmarker operation for 20 years, far longer than any other example in their situation. The next closest I can think of is Osella, who just about notched a decade stint before collapsing. Anyway, I've done enough waffling about teams that aren't the subject of this video, so without further ado, let's get into this and discuss the full story of everyone's favourite backmarker in F1 history. Giancarlo Minardi was born on the 18th of September 1947 in Faenza, Italy, and was already immersed in the world of cars, as his family owned a Fiat dealership and an Agip fuel station, while his father Giovanni was involved in motor racing before he died while Giancarlo was very young. The young Giancarlo followed in his dad's footsteps by opening a truck dealership to kick off his business career, but he turned to racing in 1968, advancing from Fiat 500s to rallying, then to Formula Italia and European Formula 2 in the early to mid-1970s, beginning his first period acting in a senior role, managing the Scuderia del Passatore team. It was in the year 1980, though, when he formed the racing team that bared his own name, acquiring financial backing from Piero Mancini, a well-known man in Italian motorsport of the time, in order to compete in European Formula 2. They would compete in the Junior Series for 5 seasons, fielding countless future F1 prospects, but made the step up to the top category in 1985 with only one car, driven by Pierluigi Martini. Initially equipped with a Ford Cosworth DFY engine, a switch to veteran power unit designer Carlo Citti's Maturi Moderni examples was made after just 2 races. The unreliable and slow machine had 9 mechanical failures throughout the season and finished only twice under its own steam, even failing to qualify around the tight streets of Monaco, scoring no points with a best finish of 8th at the season finale in Adelaide. Minardi expanded to 2 cars in 1986, driven by the experienced Andrea De Cesaris and rookie Alessandro Nannini, but their reliability got worse, with both of their new recruits taking the checkered flag only once in a solitary double finish in Mexico in a season surrounded by constant issues. The following year saw De Cesaris move to Brabham and Spaniard Adrian Campos fill his position, but this was essentially a copy of the previous season. No points, 2 legitimate finishes, and constant underperformance as they only beat fellow minnows Osella and Coloni. Switching from the temperamental Maturi Moderni engines to far more reliable, if not still underpowered Ford ones, 1988 began with future HRT team principal Luis Perez Sala completing what was the first, and so far only, full-time Spanish driver lineup in F1 history, alongside Campos, although the previous year's choice was dropped after 5 rounds, having failed to qualify 3 times in a row before his dismissal, before the returning Martini took Minardi's first ever points finish at the Detroit Grand Prix, which despite having some attrition, saw the Italian still placed ahead of 3 other drivers. The duo of Perez Sala and Martini was retained heading into the following season, having shown signs of potential, while similarly sized outfits like Coloni or Osella squandered. After 7 consecutive retirements for Pierluigi and 5 failures to finish for Luis, intertwined with 2 DNQs, the pair took 5th and 6th place respectively at the British Grand Prix, the team's first ever double points result, which not only improved their Constructors' Championship position, but also prevented them from falling into the perilous pre-qualifying. This session that took place on the Friday morning before every Grand Prix weekend saw a range of completely uncompetitive outfits attempt to get into the top 30 and try to make it onto the grid for an F1 race without having much chance of success, so staying clear of this benefited Minardi greatly. Martini backed up his top 5 in Silverstone with another 5th in Estoril later in the year, and during that race the Italian led 1 lap in the pit stop cycle, the first in his team's history. He followed that up with 6th place in Adelaide for the season finale, yet despite increasing their tally from a solitary point in 88 to 6th the year after, they dropped from 10th to 11th in the Constructors. For the first year of a new decade, Perez Sala was dropped in favour of the man who substituted for the outfit in Suzuka less than 12 months earlier, the richest man in F1 history, Paolo Barilla, who I've previously done a video on if you'd like to check it out on the top right corner of your screen. While Barilla struggled and was replaced by Gianni Morbidelli with 2 rounds remaining after failing to qualify for 3 races in a row in Belgium, Italy and Portugal, Martini and Morbidelli had difficulties too, and aside from a 7th in Phoenix, 8th in Japan and a pair of 9th places in Interlagos and Adelaide, the team showed no real potential and scored no points across the season for the first time since 1987. Martini and Morbidelli stayed on for the next year though, and on home turf in Imola, the former driver bettered the team's highest ever result, finishing 4th. Then in Estoril, Martini was fighting John Alesi's Ferrari for a scarcely believable podium position, although he dropped back in the latter stages to take another top 4, all this occurring while Morbidelli failed to register a single point, which still culminated in a so far best 7th place in the standings for the team. Martini left Minardi for fellow Italian backmarkers BMS Scuderia Italia, or Dallara as they were more commonly known, for 1992, allowing the previous year's F3000 champion, Christian Fittipaldi, to swoop in and join Minardi. The team went from using customer Ferrari engines to Lamborghini V12s, but this coincided with a loss in competitiveness, as by the French Grand Prix, Morbidelli had achieved a best finish of 7th at Interlagos, while his Brazilian teammate took a measly 8th at Monaco. For 3 rounds after the race in Magny-Cours, Alessandro Zanardi replaced Fittipaldi, who had failed to qualify in France, but himself struggled to do any better, getting 2 DNQs and a retirement in his short stint before his predecessor returned. The Brazilian continued to have difficulties qualifying the car inside the top 26, but Fittipaldi took Minardi's only point of the year with 6th place in Suzuka, a paltry total compared to their previous year's showing. 1993 kicked off with a bang though, as the Brazilian scored a fantastic 4th place in South Africa, the first race of the year. Then his teammate, who had begun his career in the American open wheel racing scene before making the switch to F1 since the turn of the decade, Fabrizio Barbazza, took consecutive 6th in Donington and Imola. Fittipaldi got another top 5 in Monaco, meaning the team had amassed 7 points in the first 6 races of the year, joined with Lotus for 5th place in the Constructors' standings. Despite their early form, and the mid-season return of Minardi later on as his previous employers had got rid of him, no more points were recorded in the rest of 93, but this was nonetheless their biggest tally yet, to put them 8th in the final table. Money problems were beginning to swallow many privateer outfits in F1, so Minardi merged with Scuderia Italia, and one of their 1993 drivers, former Grand Prix winner and 1985 vice-champion Michele Alboreto, joined Minardi for 1994 alongside Martini, and the former scored a best finish of 6th in Monaco in his final F1 season, while the returning stalwart, Pierluigi, took 2 5th places in Spain and France to bring home a few points and a top 10 constructors result. 1995 saw Flavio Briatore invest in the outfit, and he put former Benetton test driver Luca Badoer in a full-time seat, but with Martini's retirement after 10 years of service following the German Grand Prix in the middle of a campaign, his Portuguese replacement Pedro Lamy took their only major result of the year, with 6th at the attritional race in Adelaide. That race was so messy, in fact, that Damon Hill's Williams had 2 laps distance on second place Olivier Panis, not because the Brit had driven a legendary race, but it was more so that every other top car had retired, and this event nearly saw the hopeless 40 team sneak a point, thanks to Pedro Diniz, but the Brazilian narrowly missed out in 7th, along with the mediocre footwork team also getting 3rd, with Minardi's former driver, Morbidelli. The former owner of the Fond Metal outfit, Gabriele Rumi, became a major sponsor for Minardi in 1996 and later became a co-owner, but this off-track support did not lead to immediate results, which was probably not a surprise when, despite employing impressive youngsters like Lamy and rookie Giancarlo Fisichella, awful pay drivers like Tarso Marquez and Giovanni Lavaggi were given races purely to balance the books, as Minardi failed to achieve any point-scoring finishes in a season for the first time in 6 years. They completely switched up their lineup for 1997, hiring Japanese midfield stalwart Ukyo Katsuyama and a young Jarno Trulli, although the Italian moved to Prost mid-season in the wake of Olivier Panis's leg break in Canada, which meant Marquez took his place, and the outfit again didn't score, with Trulli taking their best finish with 2 9th places. Shinji Nakano moved to Minardi after an underwhelming season with Prost for 1998 and was partnered by the extremely young 19-year-old Argentine starlet Esteban Tuero, and despite countless finishes inside the top 8, the team achieved their 3rd consecutive pointless season in 1998. Tuero had massively outperformed his expectations, given Martin Brundle said before the season opening Australian Grand Prix that he would struggle to even make the 107% rule, yet he often beat Nakano, who had far more top single-seater experience than his young counterpart. Luca Badoer rejoined Minardi for 1999, partnered by the reigning Euro Open by Nissan champion Marc Genet, and the Italian was running in 4th place in the European Grand Prix held at the Nürburgring before his gearbox casing cracked and forced him to retire, leaving him sobbing at the side of a track as he had never got closer to breaking the unenviable record he still holds to this day, that being the record for being the driver with the most races entered and started without scoring any points. Genet's 6th place in that event ended their 4-year-long points drought though, and moved him ahead of BAR in the Constructors, but Badoer's emotive response showed not just the struggle he'd had in his career, but also of the team's recent fortunes, as Formula 1 was becoming increasingly more expensive and difficult for small teams to operate in. 2000 was a lacklustre year, as neither the Spaniard Genet, who was kept on, nor pay driver Gaston Mazacane could achieve a result better than 8th. With the excess of funding from Gabriele Rumi and the constant rising expenses of racing in Formula 1, Giancarlo Minardi sold his eponymous team to Australian Paul Stoddart for 2001, yet the new owner retained its original name and gave a debut to future 2-time champion Fernando Alonso. Neither he, the hopeless rookie Alex Young, nor the returning Marquez could achieve a point, despite Alonso showing impressive qualifying results. In 2002, though, a golden opportunity arose at the first race, when Ralf Schumacher discovered what it was like to smash into another guy's rear end at the start of the season-opening Australian Grand Prix, and a separate incident occurred in the midfield, taking out several cars, which allowed the door to open for Stoddart's countryman, the young Mark Webber, and Young, to get a good result. When Mika Salo's Toyota spun whilst pressuring the Minardi of Webber for 5th late on, it sealed the deal for a great finish. It was a fantastic result for a constructor that had had nothing to celebrate for a long while beforehand, and the young driver and his boss stood on the podium post-race to grant their fellow Aussies in the crowd, while Young missed out on points a lap down on his teammates. Further top sixers eluded them for the rest of 2002, and at the Brazilian race at Interlagos the following year, neither the late Justin Wilson nor Jos Verstappen could capitalise on the chaos that unfolded to allow Giancarlo Fisichella to win, driving the 9th fastest car, the Jordan, nor did they manage to pull off a miraculous 1-2 starting position at Magny-Cours in a drying qualifying session which saw both drivers right at the top of the pile, and given the difficulty to overtake on the fast layout, it could have led to a similar situation to when Leighton House nearly won at Paul Ricard 13 years earlier. Despite the expansion of points from the top 6 to the top 8, and Zsolt Baumgartner scoring at Indianapolis in 2004, it was clear that modern privateer teams were slowly being weeded out, as formerly fantastic or experienced operations like Tyrrell and Arrows had fallen into obscurity before vanishing off the grid. This fate was soon about to catch up to the likes of Minardi and Jordan, but the farcical events of a race in the United States in 2005 practically assured that the Italian outfit would not survive much longer, as the 3rd and 4th positions for Thiago Montero and Narain Karthikeyan, driving for their Irish rivals, usurped the efforts of Christian Albers and Patrick Friesacker. Minardi and Stoddart sold up to Red Bull in order for the up-and-coming team to create a junior outfit named Toro Rosso, and despite rebranding, kept them based in Faenza for 20 years, although there are rumours that they want to move them closer to their main centre in Milton Keynes, which would ruin a piece of Formula 1 history if they left a great place of interest. Nonetheless, Minardi has the 2nd most race starts for a constructor without a win, and the most without a podium on 340, and unless Haas continue dithering about the way they have since 2019, that's unlikely to change. Even if the American team overtakes them in this department, they still won't achieve the cult underdog status that Minardi accrued over 20 years of relative underperformance. They outlasted 24 other aspirational constructors that started out after they did, having better longevity than those with prominence in other racing series, like Zaxpeed, and used their finite resources better than fellow minnows like Life, Kiloni, 40 or Pacific. They embodied the idea of going racing simply for the fun of it, not to be overambitious and try to win or make money, just to enjoy putting cars on a track and being part of a rolling circus that is Formula 1. Given how close the modern day fields are in terms of performance, it's likely that we will never see another team like Minardi that sticks around for a full 20 years without any success. They brought up some great drivers despite their lack of results, such as Alessandro Nannini, Gianni Trulli, Giancarlo Fisichella, Fernando Alonso and Mark Webber, and saw off the careers of veterans like Andrea De Cesaris, Michele Alboreto, and maybe even Jos Verstappen if you count him as an experienced example. Minardi may now only be a footnote in the mind of a casual modern-day F1 fan, but those who remember when they would turn up and try to score points, then celebrate like they won the championship when they did, will feel a sense of nostalgia for a type of team that simply can't exist nowadays. Some fans even refuse to call the Red Bull Junior team by any variation of its modern names, whether it be Racing Bulls, V-Carb, AlphaTauri, or even Toro Rosso, because for so many people, they still like to keep Minardi's great spirit alive. It's a shame they no longer exist, because everyone loves to root for an underdog, but without further ado, I think that brings this video to a close. I hope you enjoyed me taking an interesting look into the full story of the Minardi Formula 1 team, and if you did, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to see more content from me in the future. You can also subscribe to my Patreon if you'd like to see exclusive content, get videos a day early, and have an opportunity to converse with me personally for as little as $1 per month. Big shout out to my already existing Patreon subscribers Andy Lamberts, George Stratford and Elizabeth Hearn, and you can also take a look at the DRS Train Podcast, which I host alongside Peter Brook, Nav F1 and Ciaron Smith, where we take deep dives into historical topics and race previews when the F1 season is on. Furthermore, you can follow my X/Twitter account where I post boiling hot lava takes on F1, IndyCar and NASCAR, and you can follow my Instagram for behind the scenes updates. With my shameless plugging over though, I'm Nedzo, and I'll see you all later. Bye!